Hello, I'm Ollie, and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, none of that. Today, I'm going to talk about 10 works of literary fiction which I think are great and which I also think pretty much any reader could read. Now, it's no secret that I tend to gravitate towards the less challenging end of the literary spectrum, shall we say. On this channel, I talk mostly about crime books, horror books, pulp books. I've just finished hosting a month-long event dedicated to reading trashy books. So I definitely am much more of a fan of popular fiction than I am of literary fiction. But I do still read a bit of literary fiction. And I was reflecting back on my reading recently and thinking that I need to read more good books, shall we say. So I thought I would put this list together of 10 books that I, as a lover and consumer of popular fiction, found easy to read and share that with you, because I think a lot of people think of, and certainly I have in the past, think of literary fiction as something really challenging and daunting. And actually, a lot of these books are just as enjoyable and gripping as a thriller. So I thought I would share my 10 of my favourites with you. But don't take my word for it. So what I've done quite deliberately is chosen 10 books that have won a major literary award. So all of these books have won either the Booker Prize in the UK, the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in the US, or the National Book Award in the US. So it's not just my opinion. People far smarter than me think these are great books too. Okay, these are in no particular order. The first book is The Amazing Adventures of Kavalier and Klay by Michael Chabon. Now, this is a wonderful novel. It's quite long, but it's really enjoyable. About two European Jewish guys who emigrate to the US during the rise of the Nazis in Europe and end up writing comic books and becoming really successful writing comic books. And it's just really, really engaging and entertaining, but touches on so many really important topics as well. And as well as being, a history of, the Jewish people in America, particularly in the second half of the 20th century, it also really touches on the history of comic books, and it's fascinating in that regard as well. Next book is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, another really long book. This one's really long, but it's so gripping. So it's a Western about two friends who go on a cattle drive with a bunch of people who work for them. And what's wonderful about this book is the characters. So Larry McMurtry is just brilliant at creating characters. So in this book you get all the kind of stuff you'd expect in a Western, but told through the perspectives of characters who you absolutely fall in love with. So that every event, no matter how small, feels like it has real meaning because you come to know these people through the course of the book. Okay, next is The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga, which is a brilliant novel about, set in India, about a young guy kind of making his fortune and the effects of that on his life and his family. In many ways, it's a kind of classic rags to riches type story, which is, the kind of thing that was, has always been popular in fiction. But there's so much extra richness and colour to this story. It really elevates it, and it's absolutely wonderful. Okay, next is Life of Pi by Yann Martel, which is a wonderful story about a young man who is on a ship which sinks, and he ends up in a lifeboat with a tiger trying to get back to land across the ocean. It's just a fantastic story about the power of the human spirit and our will to survive, and just a hugely gripping and enjoyable story with some really magical moments as well. Next is Milkman by Anna Burns, a fantastic book told from the perspective of a young woman living in Northern Ireland in the 1970s, so in the depths of the troubles in Northern Ireland. And it's very much about the community she lives in, the people around her, and particularly her unwitting involvement with this paramilitary known as the Milkman. But what's wonderful about it is the richness of the language. So it's an incredibly enjoyable book to read just because the language is so lovely. It really flows beautifully, and it's very, very funny at times. So a really, really lovely book. Okay, next is Beloved by Toni Morrison, a book set just after the American Civil War, about a young woman who, as a former slave, is now freed but doesn't feel free. And it's about her coming to terms with the past that she's lived through. And it's filled with kind of supernatural elements as well, which really make it compelling and very readable. Next is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. So I prefer this to Colson Whitehead's better known book, The Underground Railroad. So The Nickel Boys is about an institution for young offenders in the one of the southern states of the US in like the kind of 1950s and 60s, I think it is, and some terrible crimes that happened there. And it's told really from the perspective of this one young guy who's kind of been thrown into the system and has to survive, and it's about the impacts of what happened there, both on him and on the people he meets. Really compelling, a really fantastic crime novel, but deeply moving too. Next is The Road by Cormac McCarthy, so probably one that's familiar to people, if not from the book and from the movie. So a fantastically grim and dark story about a father and son trying to survive after a nuclear holocaust. It's incredibly grueling, but like Life of Pi, really speaks to that need to survive, that drive to live that sits within all of us. Fantastically gripping, but a very dark read at times. Okay, next is The Killer Angels by Michael Shaara, a really engaging book about the American Civil War, which touches on characters from both sides, from generals right down to foot soldiers, and just a really compelling book about war and the effect of war on the people who fight it. And finally, Sing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn, which is a story about a young boy in Mississippi and his extended family and kind of the history of that family. So really touches on the treatment of African Americans in the southern states. But also, like Beloved, has kind of supernatural elements woven through it, which make it incredibly compelling and allow it to tell its story in quite an accessible way. So yeah, another really fantastic book. So I hope you found that list useful. Do let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about and what you thought of them. As I say, I think they're all fantastic, and the judges of various literary prizes did too, but they're also all very accessible and easy to read books. So I'm not someone who likes reading difficult books, and none of these were. I breezed through all of these, and I'm sure you will too. As always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.